Can you imagine a son challenging his own father to a fight? I mean, what if that argument tragically escalated to a fatal stabbing? How does the highest court in the land weigh the testimony of a single eyewitness against a son's denial in such a deeply personal and devastating crime?
That's exactly the tragic scenario we're unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into a really significant Supreme Court case. It's People of the Philippines versus Paulino Delos Santos Jr., alias Skylab.
Skylab, okay.
Yeah. The GR number is 248929, and the decision came down on November 9, 2020.
Got it. So our mission here is to understand the facts, right? The whole journey through the courts, the big question the Supreme Court had to answer, and what they finally decided in this case that got a lot of attention.
Exactly. We'll trace it from the beginning to the final ruling.
Yeah.
Our main source, of course, is the Supreme Court decision itself.
Okay, so let's lay out the facts. Where and when did this happen?
Right. It all went down around 11:30 p.m. May 8, 2011. This was in Purok 2, Barangay Macalabo Island, Parricide, Camarines Norte.
Okay.
The appellant, Paulino Delos Santos Jr., Skylab. He showed up at his brother-in-law's house, a man named Jovito living in. His brother, Marcos Delos Santos, and some others were there too.
And things got heated quickly, I understand.
Immediately, yeah. The reports say Paulino Jr. seemed intoxicated and right away started a really intense argument with his brother Marcos. This noise woke up their father, Paulino Delos Santos Sr., who was the victim in the end. He came out and told Paulino Jr. to leave.
But he didn't go.
No, he refused. Actually, he apparently warned his father not to get involved and then challenged him to a fight, his own father.
Wow. And that led to the physical confrontation.
It did. And during that struggle, the prosecution says Paulino Jr. stabbed his father, upper left chest, with some kind of bladed weapon.
Oh, man.
After the stabbing, Paulino Jr. fled. Tragically, his father, Paulino Sr., died before they could even get him to the hospital.
And there was an eyewitness.
Yes, a really crucial one, Michael L. San Gabriel. He was a cousin of the victim's daughter, and he testified that he saw the whole thing. He positively identified Paulino Jr. as the one who stabbed his father.
That's powerful testimony. What about the police investigation?
Police Officer 3 Gil Obog investigated. He actually knew Paulino Jr. from some previous cases, apparently. And the medical side was confirmed by Dr. Virginia Mazzo, the municipal health officer. She issued the death certificate listing the stab wound as the cause of death.
Okay, so that's the prosecution's case, but Paulino Jr. denied it all.
Completely denied it. His story was very different. He claimed he was woken up by noise from Jovito's house, went over, and saw Jovito, the brother-in-law, with blood on his hands. And when Paulino Jr. asked what happened, he says Jovito threatened him, told him to leave, or he'd be killed too.
So, two totally conflicting accounts. This must have gone to trial.
It did. Criminal case number 14834, charged with parricide. Paulino Jr. pleaded not guilty.
And the trial court, the RTC, what happened there?
The prosecution put Michael, the eyewitness, Dr. Mazzo, and PO3 Obo Cog on the stand. For the defense, it was just Paulino Jr. himself testifying.
Just him.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
And on September 5, 2016, the RTC indicted Camarines Norte, Branch 39, found him guilty.
Guilty of parricide. What was their reasoning?
They basically said the prosecution proved all the elements needed for parricide. And crucially, they found Michael's positive identification more convincing than Paulino Jr.'s denial and his alibi attempt.
In the sentence.
Reclusion perpetua. The decision initially said, without eligibility of parole, plus damages P75,000 civil indemnity, P50,000 moral, and P30,000 exemplary damages to the father's heirs.
But he appealed this, right, to the Court of Appeals?
He did. He argued the prosecution didn't prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. He specifically attacked the credibility of Michael, the single eyewitness, and pointed out that others present weren't called to testify.
Makes sense to question that. What did the government argue back?
The Office of the Solicitor General, the OSG, they stood by the eyewitness. They argued that one positive, credible identification is enough under the law.
And the Court of Appeals agreed.
Yes, the CA upheld the conviction. This was in their decision on June 28, 2018. They kept the guilty verdict, but tweaked the damages slightly, adding a 6% annual interest from the finality until it's all paid.
So after the CA, the only place left was the Supreme Court.
That's right. The big question for the Supreme Court was pretty straightforward. Did the Court of Appeals make a mistake in confirming the conviction?
And what was the final word from the highest court?
The Supreme Court, on November 9, 2020, affirmed the CA's decision, again with some modifications mainly to the damages. They went back to the basics of parricide under Article 246 of the Revised Penal Code.
Which requires what, exactly?
3 things. 1, someone is killed.
Oh.
2, the accused killed them. And 3, the victim is the accused's parent, child, spouse, or other specific relative listed in the law. The third element, the relationship, wasn't really disputed. Paulino Jr. admitted Paulino Sr. was his father. The court even said you don't strictly need a birth certificate. Oral evidence of the relationship is okay, especially when admitted.
Interesting point about the birth certificate. So the main issue was elements 1 and 2, the killing and who did it.
Exactly. And on that, the Supreme Court really leaned on Michael's testimony. They found his identification positive, categorical, credible. They reiterated that a single eyewitness can be enough as long as they're believable.
Even if there were minor inconsistencies.
Yeah, the court said minor inconsistencies don't really matter if the core testimony on the essential parts is consistent. And they noted Michael's account matched the physical evidence, that single stab wound.
What about motive? Did they establish why he might have done it?
Motive wasn't definitively proven, but the court pointed out that, look, lack of clear motive doesn't automatically mean innocence, especially when you have positive ID. They did suggest the argument with the brother, then the confrontation with the father. That could have been the trigger.
Right. And they didn't find any reason for the witness to lie.
No ill motive was shown for Michael to falsely accuse Paulino Jr. Plus, the court considered his flight from the scene.
Fleeing is often seen as consciousness of guilt, right?
Yes, it can be taken as evidence pointing towards guilt. The Supreme Court also gave a lot of weight to the trial court's findings on witness credibility, especially since the CA agreed. The trial judge sees the witness testify firsthand.
So Paulino Jr.'s denial and alibi didn't stand a chance against that?
The court called them self-serving and weaker than the positive ID. And his alibi was weak anyway because he admitted being nearby, not somewhere far away.
And the sentence modification, you mentioned that.
Right. Reclusion perpetua stood, as there were no mitigating or aggravating circumstances found, but the court removed the without eligibility for parole language, citing specific legal guidelines like AM number 150802 and RA 9346. They adjusted the damages to civil indemnity stayed at P75,000, but moral and exemplary damages were both increased to P75,000 each. They also added P50,000 in temperate damages. And, like the CA, they kept the 6% interest.
Okay, so after going through all that, it really makes you think, doesn't it, about how much weight one person's testimony can carry, especially in such a painful family crime.
Right.
How does the law balance that presumption of innocence with, well, the awful reality of what happened?
That's a tough balance. This case really puts a spotlight on how critical a credible eyewitness is, but it also shows the challenge of finding the absolute truth when family conflict turns violent.
Definitely food for thought. For you listening, we'd love to hear what you think. Drop your comments below. Did anything particularly stand out? Mark your favorites.
And just to recap some key legal takeaways or doctrines from this decision. First, positive identification. If a credible witness clearly identifies the accused, that's very strong evidence.
Okay.
Second, lone witness testimony. Quality over quantity. One good witness can be enough. Witnesses are weighed, not just counted.
Right.
Third, denial and alibi. These are seen as weak defenses, especially against positive ID unless strongly proven.
Got it.
Fourth, flight as evidence of guilt. Running away can be used as an indicator of guilt. Fifth, credibility of witnesses. Trial courts get deference because they observe the witness directly. And finally, oral evidence of filial relationship. Family ties can be proven through testimony, not just documents, especially if admitted.
That's a great summary of the key legal points.
Yeah, they're principles that come up quite often.
Well, if you found this deep dive insightful and you want to unpack more fascinating legal cases like this one, maybe understand a bit more about the forces shaping our laws and society, make sure you subscribe to the deep dive. We'll bring you more knowledge regularly.